Guys, welcome. Hey, today I'm going to talk about the split toning panel in Lightroom. And so, if that's something you're interested in learning more about, this video is for you. Also, in the notes, you'll find a link to an article I've written that kind of goes over it as well. So, you'll have both resources available to you, both this video as well as the article on my website, to really kind of learn about split toning, how it can help you create images that are unique. Create looks and feels with your image that can kind of help you fine tune or tweak the images to get them just how you want them to be. The split toning panel can kind of be one of those panels in Lightroom that people are afraid to go into, that are a little bit less intuitive, if you will. Something that maybe they understand maybe what it does, but not how it can help them with their images. So I hope you enjoy this video. Subscribe, because I think that that will help you continue to learn Lightroom and maybe get into areas of Lightroom that you haven't really delved into before. So let's get started. Let me open up this image and whoops, this image right here. And what I first want to do, let me go to split toning, is let's just talk about the interface of the split toning panel. So we have highlights, we have shadows, we have a hue slider and saturation slider for both the highlights and the shadows. And the hue saturation, obviously hue is just another name for color, and so you can move this to add color to your image, but it will only be added if you move the saturation slider as well. So for example, I can move this anywhere along this line and nothing changes with my image, and that's because I haven't saturated any colors towards that color that I'm placing here. So when I adjust these sliders, I'm dealing only with the highlights. When I adjust these sliders, I'm dealing only with the shadows. So let's say I want to increase the saturation. Let's go to 100% of my shadows. I can then move my hue slider, and it will change the colors of that saturation in the shadow areas. Okay, double click to zero out. Same thing could happen if I go to 100% in the saturation slider of the highlights. I can now move to saturate any color into those highlights that I want. Okay, double click highlights to zero out both of those sliders. Okay, the balance slider, let me go back to let's go right here. The balance slider, basically what that will do is tell Lightroom what percentage of pixels you want to make highlights and what percentage you want to make shadow. So if I move it to the right, all of my pixels become highlight pixels. If I move it to the left, all of my pixels become shadow pixels. So you can see this this color that I've introduced, this green, is totally removed from the image when I've moved excuse me, my balance all the way down. And that's because I'm telling Lightroom all of these pixels I want to be shadow pixels, not highlight pixels. So as I move that back, I slowly introduce those colors back into the highlights. Now, let me double click that. Now, the easiest way to do this is by clicking on these colored squares right here. So if I click on this top one, it will allow me to visually pick the color I want. So again, if I drag to the left or right, I'm changing the hue. If I drag up or down, I'm changing the saturation. Okay, there's also some presets here that you can click on that will give you some options as to where to put your colors, and maybe a good starting point as to what you want with split toning your image. So let me tell you kind of how I use the split toning panel, or some of the great ways that I think it's good for. For these first few images, like for example, this image that you see here, this image was obviously shot in the fall, but it doesn't really have a real rich fall feel to it or autumn feel to it. And so one way in which I use the split toning panel is to kind of create that autumn feel, or to give it kind of a warm color cast so that your image really kind of has that that feel you get in the fall. So I'm going to start with the shadows. And what I'm going to do is just come right in here between the greens and the reds. I'm going to just come in here to the oranges, and I'm just going to give just a little bit. Okay, so right there. So if I close that, and if I turn split toning on and off, you can see how I've just added a little bit of warmth to the shadows of this image, which just gives it that little more of a fall feel. I can do the same thing in the highlights. Now you'll notice something as I've opened up the color picker in the highlights. You'll see the more grayed out square, I guess is what I would call it, right here. This is showing me where the other color picker is set for the shadows. So I could take this one and oops, let me click on it there. There we go. And I can drag it and put it right there as well, so they both match. Or I can drag it lower, or I can drag it higher. I can be anywhere I want, but that kind of gives me a reference of the tone that I'm adding so that I can be in a similar vein there. So let me close that, and let's go ahead and turn this on and off. So can you see how that's just added some warmth to this image, almost this warm color cast that gives my image just a little bit more of a fallish look. Same thing on this image, okay? So again, I'm going to start in the shadows. I'm just going to just add right through there. And then in the highlights, I might add just a little bit less as well. But again, same thing. Let me turn that one on, off, on, off. And I'm kind of going quick, but you're getting the idea. Now, with this image, we did this family shoot. We kind of missed the fall leaves. They scheduled it a little bit late, and you can see the trees have mostly lost their leaves, and there's a little snow on the ground in the bottom right-hand side. You can see that. And so this image especially, I want to kind of give it that warm glow, even though it wasn't present. You know, in the wintertime, oftentimes our images will kind of have a cooler tone to them. And so for this image, they wanted that fall look, even though it wasn't really fall anymore. And so if I do the same type of thing, I can come in here, and in the shadows, I don't want to go too crazy. In fact, let me put it a little higher than I normally would. So let me put it about right there. So that's probably a little bit higher than I would choose to have it. And what I can do is I can come in here to use the balance, which I can see I left it a little bit high. And I can come in and I can either remove it, I can add it everywhere, but I can find a nice balance without being in that color picker, which is a little more sensitive than the balance slider. I can kind of find exactly where I want it. So right about there. Again, it gives that warmth, that feel that you'd get from the sun. Let me go to this one. Okay, again, I've missed fall. Look at the leaves. Look at the trees. They have lost their foliage. There really aren't that many leaves left. And so this image, I really want to give kind of a warm or a unique look to. Now, I'm not just going to give it a color cast. So on this one, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drag the saturation down. And that is just going to bring down the tones of her dress, even bring down the skin tones just a little bit. Then I'm going to go back into split toning here. I'm going to again start in the shadows, and I'm just going to kind of raise this up just to give some warmth in the shadows. Okay, and let me go into the highlights. Same type of thing. Just going to kind of come in here and just give a little bit of warmth. And then I can come to my balance, and I can find kind of a nice mix between the two. Okay, so let's go with that one. So let me turn off split toning and see what I've done. See what a drastic effect that's made on this image. It's almost created a little bit of a sepia tone or a brown toned image, but yet there's still color to it. And so by dragging down your saturation, by not making it fully black and white, but just diminishing your saturation, lets some of those natural colors come through, but in a more diminished way. And then also what's happening is it's taking these warm tones and it's pushing them a little bit to the brown. And so it gives kind of this more of a deep, rich look to the image. So you can get in there and play around with this. If that's a look you like in your images, you can get an image and mess around with it to find the look exactly how you want it. Let me move to this next image. Now on these next couple, this is really where most people will use, excuse me, the split toning panel, is where they will use it to create an image from a black and white image. So with this image, I like this image, but I think this image would look really great black and white. So I turn an image black and white. I just click on the black and white of the HSL panel right there, okay? And then I make sure my orange slider is a little bit higher, because if you notice, if I move this, notice their skin, when you're doing pictures of people, as you raise that orange, it just brings a little more brightness to the skin. Okay? And so, oh, look, I've already got some set here. I'm going to zero that out. So here is a black and white image right here. And so this is kind of where toning in images actually began. Back in black and white, before color film was even around, in the darkroom, photographers would tone their images, sepia tone, cyanotype, these types of things, to get kind of a unique look and feel to their image. And so this image is black and white. I like it, but let's add a little bit of warmth. And so what I can do is just come right into here. Again, I'm going to stick with kind of those warmer tones. You could do anything you want. You could come over here to the bluer tones if that was a look you were after. But I'm again going to stick with the warmer tones and just kind of come up right there. Now, a sepia tone image is mostly toning the shadows. There can be some tones to the highlights, but to really create a nice sepia tone, you mostly have toning in the shadows. So let me move just a little bit up into the highlights right here. So right about there. So there's a before and there's an after. So you can see how you create kind of a really unique look. Same couple, kind of same area. I'm going to turn this one black and white as well. My oranges are already lifted so that I have some lightness in their skin tones, which is where I want it. And then if I go to split toning here, let me zero out my balance. And same type of thing, just going to add a little bit of warmth right through the shadows, and then just a little bit less right there in the highlights. And again, if I'm not happy with that, I can come into my slider here, my balance slider, and I can push it more to the browns, or I can push it less and more to kind of a black and white with just a hint of toning. So you can get really quite creative with the split toning panel. Okay, last one. So with this image, let me zero these out. Okay, so we're here. So this image now has been color corrected. I've got the contrast and the density where I want it, but it's a little boring in my eyes. Or let's say I've given them a lot of images and I want to go back and take just a few and really kind of make them unique. And so these are some things that you can do. So for this image, what I'll do is, because of the tones of her shirt, of the pants here, what I'll do is I will actually go and I will put a cooler tone in the shadows. That's going to cool down the rock, the dark areas of the rock. It's also going to cool down the clothing and things like that, the darker areas. And then in the highlights, I'm going to add some warmth. Okay, so what you can see that I've done is I've just created kind of a vintage look to this image, where I have some blues in the shadows and I have some warmth in the highlights. Skin tones are generally found in the highlights, unless you're taking pictures of someone of color, and then that's going to change a little bit. But skin tones are generally found in the highlights, so you don't really want to drag the highlights down to the blue, or you start to have blue-looking people, and that's not what you want. But if I go right somewhere in that range. Now, something else I want to do, and I teach this in another video on understanding the tone curve. And so in the article that's linked in the notes, you'll be able to have a link directly to where I teach about the tone curve. But if you already know the tone curve, great. If you don't, you should check that out. But what I want to create now is with the tone curve is kind of create a matte look, or make this image even more vintage by removing a true black point and removing a true white point. And how you do that is you click on these points at the top and the bottom. My top right is my white point. So if I drag that down, you'll notice I'm losing a pure white. So if I bring it there, and then I'm going to move it in so I still keep kind of some of that crispness. Okay, and the same thing here. If I raise this up, this is my dark points. If I raise this up, I lose a true black. Can you see how that's happening? And then I move it in to keep some of the contrast that's still happening. Okay, you'll notice now that I don't have a true white and I don't have a true black. And you can especially see it if you look at the histogram. I've got no black area here, and I've got no data in the white area here as well. So I've created kind of this vintage flat look. Now, if I create another point in here and just kind of tweak it just a bit, I'll be able to adjust that curve to give me just a little more brightness to the image. Okay, so there's the after, there's the before, after, before. So what I've created here is an image that kind of has a vintage feel, both with the toning as well as with the matte feel, the no true dark, no true white point in the image. So hopefully you can see that as you start to combine these panels together, you can get really creative in Lightroom. And like I say, part of the beauty of using Lightroom is not just editing your images quickly or editing them all together. It's editing them in a way that's unique to you. Especially today, there are so many photographers, and it's so imperative that you create a style or a look that's all your own. And as you start to tweak and mess around with some of these panels, you'll really come to discover a look and a feel that you like and that you prefer, something you get excited about. Now, this look that I've created here, that may not be something you do on every image. I wouldn't create this look on every image, but it might be something that you do on several images for a client so that they have that unique look or that unique feel. And so when you display images that attract other clients, that kind of unique look sets you apart and makes you have something different than anybody else has. So it's important that you learn how these panels work, how these sliders work to help you create really unique images. So there you go. That is the split toning panel for you. If you have questions, ask them in the comment section below. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. Again, subscribe. It always makes me feel good when I have new subscribers. It makes me feel like, I'm not wasting my time here making videos, although I do enjoy making these videos. But anyway, thanks so much for watching, and I hope to see you in another video later. Thanks. Bye-bye.